evening. Welcome to another Nite Line program. My name is Keith Kelly, and it is an honor indeed to be a part of this very, very special Nite Line program this evening. It is the kind of Nite Line that I think, personally, you will remember for many, many years to come. We have a very special guest on the program tonight, Mr. Jack Wurfl, author of My Two Lives. Jack, as you will learn together with me, is a Holocaust survivor. And by way of modern technology, we have made connection with him this evening, and we're going to be able to carry on a conversation. Also, his daughter Dana is present with him, and she may come in from time to time and make some comments along the way. We are very blessed this evening to have His Vineyard worship team from His Vineyard Church, the church that I have been blessed of the Lord with the privilege to pastor for almost 19 years. I am the only pastor that they have ever had, kind of like being the only brother to a sister or the only sister to a brother. I'm the best one they've ever had because I'm the only one they've ever had. But they are my church family, and I thank the Lord for their patience and their honor in giving me the privilege to pastor them. Our scripture for this evening is Proverbs 21:21, where the writer of Proverbs says, "Whoever pursues righteousness and kindness will find life, righteousness, and honor." That is the word of the Lord, and we can depend upon that, we can trust in that, and we can believe it. Thanks be unto God for His word. Well, all the way from Baltimore, Maryland, I consider it a great privilege and a profound honor to be able to introduce to our Nite Line audience this evening, Mr. Jack Wurfl. How are you this evening, Jack?
I'm just fine, thank you, sir.
Well, sir, it is a great honor to have you, and I certainly look forward to hearing your story. Before we even get into talking about your book, just tell me a little bit about yourself. How did you get from where you started to 91 years young? You've covered a lot of territory, sir. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, yeah, I was born in Germany, but I lived in Austria with my family until I was 4 years old. And then before Hitler came into Austria, the Anschluss, they called it, my father and mother sent my brother and myself to Berlin, which at that time was better than Austria, where Hitler was personally invading our country there. I lived then in Berlin until things got very hot in Berlin. And my grandfather then sent me to a summer camp in Germany on the North Sea. We were only about a block from the North Sea. And we stayed there, and we were supposed to be there for maybe a couple or 3 months or so. But to make a long story short right now, I didn't leave there until I was 17 years old.
Wow.
So I can tell you later what happened during that period of time. And when I was 17 years old, I got the opportunity to come to America, which was my dream. And we arrived in New York on January the 1st, 1950, or was it the January the 3rd, maybe, or the 1st?
Yeah.
My dream had come true.
Wow. Wow. Jack, when I hear you talking about that time period in history, it's almost surreal for me to talk with somebody who was alive, if you will pardon the reference to somebody who grew up watching television and movies in America. This is the sound of music, the era of Austria and all that was going on with the Nazi. But we know that behind that, it was not an entertaining movie, but it was a way of life that was threatened. And to be a young child as you were, and to be sent to a camp, I've just got to ask you this, sir. Best that you can remember, what is the first memory that you have of being in that camp?
My first memory, my father worked in Berlin. In Vienna.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, he worked for the government, for the president of Austria, Mr. Schuschnigg, and we lived in a little place outside of Vienna,
Mm-hmm.
Gutenstein. And my first memories are from my house there, from our walks with our parents on the weekends up into the mountains,
Mm-hmm.
seeing huge giant snails along the way. These are kind of memories, from
Yeah.
those days. And my father would go to Vienna every day by train, and when the train came back in the evening, I used to love to go down to the train station, which was really nothing but a round thing where the locomotive was turned around so the train could go back to Vienna.
Mm-hmm.
And those are my first memories. It was a wonderful life for our family and for us as long as we lived in Austria.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you remember about those first times of getting familiar and acquainted with the camp? Did you have the impression that it was going to be something like a summer camp? And if so, how long did that last?
Oh, you mean the summer camp in Germany?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, yeah, it was a little summer camp. There were about 30 to 35 children there at all times. And of course, they were all German kids.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, at that time, we were just beginning to be old enough to learn some of Hitler's philosophy, and we used to have to say Heil Hitler and those type of things. We used to learn that. Otherwise, it was a fairly nice life. The camp itself was run by a lady called Irma Franzen Heinrichsdorf. She was a wonderful lady, and later on I called her my second mother after I had lost my actual mother, because I lived with her for several years, and she was very loving. She took care of us, and she knew at that time that our mother was Jewish, which made us Jewish, and she knew it, and she protected us. And by doing so, she actually endangered her own life and the life of her two children. She had a son and a daughter in this little place called Dangast.
Mm-hmm.
As time went on, my family got into a lot of Hitler trouble, of course, in Berlin. And while we were in Dangast, I lost most of my relatives. Eventually, I can tell you more about my parents. My father was in a concentration camp. He was a political prisoner.
Uh-huh.
My mother was Jewish, so she ended up in Auschwitz, and she was killed in Auschwitz. And But there are a lot of things that happen in between, and I'll be happy to.
Yeah, yeah. It's been nearly 80 years since World War II ended, and I'm just curious about what was it that motivated you? Thankfully, there was something that motivated you after all these years to write your book, My Two Lives. What was the impetus? What was the driving force behind you writing this book? And what do you hope that the readers will take away from reading this book?
Well, the actual driving force to write the book you met a few minutes ago, it's my daughter, Dana. Dana and her husband, Tom, came to me one day, this was about 2.5 years ago, right here in Baltimore,
Mm-hmm.
and said, Dad, we need you to write a book about your life and all the things that happened, because our family, our children, our grandchildren, their children, and their great-great-grandchildren, and so on, they should know where we came from, what kind of a family we were, why we came to America, what happened to you and your brother Peter. And so I had so many requests prior to that from friends and other people to write this book.
Mm-hmm.
Because my life was just a little different than the average life of the average American, of course, you know.
Agree. Yes, sir.
So I got so many requests to write the book. And I've always told everybody, listen, there were 1,000 people or more who had the same type of life and suffered the same consequences from that time than I did. And find someone else who can really write well and write a book. So I never did it until Tom and Dana set me down 2.5 years ago and said, you got to do it, Dad, so that we always, in our family, always knows what happened and where we came from and so on. And there's one person I cannot say no to, and that's my daughter, Dana.
Gotcha.
So,
Well,
you,
that's a good thing. I'm so glad that you couldn't say no to Dana, and you didn't say no to Dana.
and
Go ahead, sir.
yeah, and I didn't. So 2.5 years ago, I finally said, well, if you ask me if it's that important to you, I will try. I can't promise you that I will do a very good job, but I will try.
Well,
And we started writing the book, and it's a lot of memories,
yeah.
a lot
Well,
of things that I hadn't thought about for so many years.
we're going to go to a song in just a moment, but before we do that, I want to ask you when we come back, if you would be willing to share some of those things. 2 or 3 times since we began talking, you have mentioned some of the things that happened that you would be willing to talk about, and I only want you to talk about whatever you want to talk about. And we're going to go to a song, and then when we come back, whatever you want to say, whatever you want to share, I want to hear it, and our viewers want to hear it as well. Is that okay with you, sir?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Well, that is wonderful. Thank you so much. Right now, we're going to go to the His Vineyard worship team as they sing Promises.
Okay.
God of Abraham, you're the God of covenant, of faithful promises. Though the storms may come and the winds may blow, I'll remain steadfast and let my heart learn when you speak a word, it will come to pass. Great is your faithfulness to me. Great is your faithfulness to me. From the rising sun to the setting same, I will praise your name. Great is your faithfulness to me. God remains your age, though the earth may pass away, your word remains the same. Your history can prove there's nothing you can do. You're faithful and true. Though the storms may come and the winds may blow, I'll remain steadfast and let my heart learn when you speak a word, it will come to pass. Great is your faithfulness to me. Great is your faithfulness to me. From the rising sun to the setting same, I will praise your name. Great is your faithfulness to me. I put my faith in Jesus, my anchor to the ground, my hope and firm foundation. He'll never let me down. I put my faith in Jesus, my anchor to the ground, my hope and firm foundation. He'll never let me down. I put my faith in Jesus, my anchor to the ground, my hope and firm foundation. He'll never let me down. He'll never let me down. Great is your faithfulness to me. Great is your faithfulness to me. From the rising sun to the setting same, I will praise your name. Great is your faithfulness to me. From the rising sun to the setting same, I will praise your name. Great is your faithfulness to me.
Thank you, His Vineyard worship team, for promises. It is our enjoyable privilege this evening to be able to have conversation with Jack Wurfl, the author of My Two Lives, a story written by a Holocaust survivor. And this is the story of a man who not only survived a horrific event, but he has thrived in spite of what he has been through. And quite honestly, being able to talk with him this evening is one of the more enjoyable experiences that I've had in a very, very long time. Jack, I want to ask you this question. Tell us about your mother in light of what went on back almost 90 years ago and 80 years ago.
Well, when Hitler came into Austria, my father and the president of Austria, they were sent in a train to a concentration camp called Sachsenhausen, which is right north of Berlin. My mother, at that point, in order to be safer, she went to Czechoslovakia to live there, because at that time, of course, Hitler was not in Czechoslovakia yet. And she lived in Prague there for 2 years while we were with our grandparents, and then to the camp in Dangast on the North Sea. My father was in the concentration camp. We were in this camp in Dangast, and my mother was living in Prague in order to save her life, because living in Berlin and anywhere in Germany for Jewish people, it was becoming worse and worse as the years went on. She finally came back, and we were approximately, my brother and I, we were then 10 years old. And when she came back, and she came back to Berlin, because Hitler by now had also invaded Czechoslovakia, and Prague was a very dangerous place to be. And because all the Jews in Czechoslovakia, like in other countries that Hitler overtook, all the Jews were subject to be shipped to various labor camps and death camps and so on. And she came back to Berlin, and she wanted to see us for a while. And she asked the lady at the camp, send my boys back to Berlin so I can spend just maybe a few months with them. Who knows what's going to go here on in Berlin. So we went back to Berlin, and we lived with her, and I started school there. School there was very different. We were kids, but we had to, when we were finished with our classes, we had to go out, we had to march, we had to learn the Heil Hitler signals, we had to learn how to use simple weapons such as hand grenades and bazookas. And anyway, my brother and I lived for a while with my mother on Meinickestrasse in Berlin. And one day my mother said, I have a mission for you two boys. And we knew somehow that my mother was living in Berlin, but somehow still communicating with my dad, who was in a concentration camp just north of Berlin. And evidently they had some SS person who was being paid to translate, to get these letters back and forth from my mother to my father. So my mother asked my brother and me to go on a mission, take the subway from this station to that station, And when you come out of the subway station at the final destination, there will be a gentleman there, and he will have a code word, and he will tell you that code word. When he does, you give him that letter, and he will give you a letter in return, and you come back home. So we did. And as we were getting out of the subway station around the corner from my home, we saw that in front of our apartment house, my mother had an apartment at that time there, we saw several automobiles from the Gestapo and the SS parked in front of that building. Well, we were carrying this letter, and we thought, well, we better stay back here and on the corner and see what's going to go on with all these cars and not go any further. So we watched it, and we thought, well, as soon as all the cars are leaving, we'll ask our mother what was going on. Well, to our surprise, it was my mother they were looking for. And the next thing we knew is we saw her being put into one of the Gestapo cars, and they disappeared, and she was arrested. My brother and I, you know, we were young, but we had learned many things in those days, and we were pretty clever. And we stayed in Berlin for a few days, to find out where my mother was, what prison did they take her to. And we finally found the prison, and we went into the prison. And first, the guards didn't really pay any attention to two little boys walking around. And we found my mother's cell where she was being kept. And we talked to my mother very, very briefly. She said, boys, she said, look, I'm here. You know I love you, and I will love you forever. You guys will love me. Be good in school. Whatever you do, learn as much as you can. Get a good education. And at this point, I think you better leave, because if not, the guards are going to come and they're going to arrest you too. And I don't want that to happen. I want you to get out of here and maybe go back to your camp in northern Germany. So we immediately left. And as we got to the exit, finally some SS trooper discovered us and tried to hold on to us, but we tore ourselves loose and ran for the exit and went into the streets, and he was following us. But, you know, 10-year-old boys can run a little better than men that age or whatever. And we got away from them. This was the last time that I saw my mother. The
Wow.
last I spoke to her. And from there, she was taken to Auschwitz, where she was killed. So we never saw her again. My mother was very careful, and while we were living in Berlin, she always said, if anything ever happens, here is the name of an attorney friend of mine. You call him, and he will tell you what to do. So we did, and he suggested that we go back to Dangas, to our summer camp there, which we did. And we did go back there. Now, the lady who ran the camp, we called her Tante Irma, meaning Aunt Irma. She had two children, a son and a daughter, and both of them, like everybody else in Germany who was not in a concentration camp, was in the Hitler Youth. You had to be, whether you were a girl or a boy, you had to be in the Hitler Youth. If you were not in the Hitler Youth, there was something wrong with you, and they were going to look for you and find out why you were not in the Hitler Youth. And God only knows what would have happened to you, probably a camp or whatever. So she suggested, boys, in order to hide yourself here with me, I want you to go ahead and join the Hitler Youth too. So we had really no choice but to join the Hitler Youth. I go back a little bit before we came there, before we were in Berlin, and we were still with our parents in the original when Hitler came into Austria. The one thing I didn't mention to you, my mother was Jewish, my father was Catholic. When they got married, my father was excommunicated from the Catholic Church because it was forbidden at that time to marry Jewish women. So my father and mother took us to a church, to a Catholic church, and had us baptized, so that all of our papers always said Catholic when it came to religion and who are you, which proved to be a great savior over the years for my brother and myself, because even when we walked down the street with our parents and our grandparents, who they all would wear a yellow star, said Jude, which means you were Jewish. We didn't have to wear those yellow stars because we were Catholic. So the reason I mentioned that now, the two things that saved us, one of them was because we were baptized Catholic, and the other thing was when we were in the camp that we joined the Hitler Youth. So those were the two things. Now, in that little village where the camp was, we were going to that school there, and we had what I thought was a wonderful teacher. I was with him for 7 or 8 years, and the little school only consisted of 2 classrooms. One classroom was grade 1 to 4, and the other one was 5 to 8. And at 8 o'clock, at 8, your usual general education was finished. So anyway, we were going to school there, and this teacher of mine was also with the SS. And every day we went to school at early in the morning at 7 or 8 o'clock, and at 1 o'clock our classes were finished, and our teacher would go change clothes, put on his black SS uniform, get on his motorcycle, and ride off to some SS meeting. And we never found out where he was going or what he was doing. In the meantime, he was a good teacher, although he was always teaching Hitler's philosophy, and he was totally within the party system, and taught us Hitler's philosophy.
Yeah. I've got to ask you this, Jack. There's so many things that come to my mind to ask you, and unfortunately we do not have a 4 or 5 hour program. So I'm trying to just narrow it down. Did you ever have an opportunity to go back once you were an adult? And if so, what was that trip like?
Well, I went back as an adult a number of times. After the first 30 years that I was in the United States, I didn't ever go back. I didn't want to go back. But as my children grew up, I thought I wanted for my children to learn what this was all about in Germany. And I took them over there and I showed them where my camp was, where I went to school, where I trained for the Hitler Youth, what kind of weapons we fired, how we fired them. So I showed them everything that I used to do and where we used to live.
Yeah.
I also took him to Berlin, showed him where my grandparents lived, where my uncles and aunts lived, who, by the way, were all killed at one time or another. And when you lived in Germany in those days, the next day your neighbor was gone, your friends were gone. You never knew what would happen. But all the people who were Jewish, sooner or later, they all disappeared and they would all be taken to some concentration camp, or a lot of them to various camps, and they ended up in Auschwitz to be killed over there.
Now, you were a young child, if I can get this right, in the epicenter of Jewish persecution in World War II. Do you have any recollection of what it was like to have your home turned into enemy territory, and also at the same time be on watch from Allied air raids, D-Day, Allied victories? What are your memories as far as those things are concerned?
Yeah, they're all very clear memories, how things changed. And my brother and I, we were, even though we were children, we were young, we were very well educated by my parents and my grandparents and uncles. We knew exactly what was going on, that we were half Jewish. And when your mother is Jewish, you're considered Jewish. And why we had to do certain things to save ourselves, and being baptized and belonging to the Hitler Youth were the excuses. Even though we hated it, we didn't want to be in the Hitler Youth, and my brother and I knew what was going on. You know, we would go to school in the morning. We was sitting there with the rest of the children, and we had to sing songs about the danger of the Jews, and that they should be done away with, and so on. And we would be with the other children, and we would sing these songs along with them. And
that's hard to imagine.
It was very, very difficult for us, because my brother and I, we knew very well what was going on. But everybody told us that's what you got to do in order to be to get through all this and live. So that's what we did.
Well, unfortunately, there's still a lot of folks today, maybe not on the same level. I'm not even trying to compare, but there's still a lot of people singing bad songs today about the Jewish people. More recently, now that Israel is at war with Hamas, and we're seeing demonstrations across the globe, do you think that this increase of what we would call anti-Semitism today is in some way comparable to what transpired during the Holocaust?
Probably not quite. I don't know, but yeah, it's very disappointing to me that this anti-Semitism has grown again, and of all places in this country that are loved so much because of the freedom and democracy and all of the things that we used to dream of. And all of a sudden, we see this anti-Semitism, and of course the war with Israel and Hamas. It's a terrible thing. We feel terrible about this. How this is ever going to end, the war, and how these countries are ever going to make some sort of arrangements where they both can live there, or whatever is going to happen. I mean, Hamas has they have one goal, and that is to kill every Jew and chase them into the Mediterranean Sea and drown them, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I know this is not a theological discussion, but just for the record, I believe, and most of our viewers believe that the Jewish people are God's chosen people. And Hitler was not able to do it. Haman in the Old Testament was not able to do it. And we believe that God's best is yet to come for Israel. And I just wanted to mention that to you.
Yeah, ever since I was a child, I would ask, what is anti-Semitism? What is it all about? And I hear the word, but what does it mean? What are the Jews doing that creates this anti-Semitism? Are they bad people? I don't think they're bad people. I think they're people like everybody else. They're good people. They're very industrial people. They work very hard. They put a lot of emphasis on education. Most of them are fairly well educated. A lot of them are very successful. And I personally think that wherever Jews lived in whatever country, it was helpful to those countries. It was good for those countries to have the Jews there because they were so industrial and they created education for other people and so on,
Well, finally, I want to ask you this question. How did your family and your personal faith play into this most obvious God-given ability to survive and eventually see your dream come true? You mentioned at the very beginning of the program, your dream came true when you were able to come to America and build, and I quote, a life that would last. How did all of those things come to a head and bring you here?
Well, we were still living after the war, of course, in Germany, and we got a call one day from the U.S. Army in southern Germany that they found records from our family that my father worked with the president of Austria, Mr. Schuschnigg, and that my mother was killed in Auschwitz. And they said, boys, if you want to come to America, because we know you had applied and nothing ever happened, but if you want to come, we'll make sure that you get there. We'll take you right now. And they did. And there was an organization called the European Help for Jewish and other children in Germany who suffered during the Nazi regime, for them to come to the United States. And it was financed by the Christians, by the Catholics, as well as by the Jews.
Wonderful.
And we got, through this organization, they brought us to the United States. So the government totally paid for all of that. And it was just marvelous for us. We were just astounded that they were doing that. And this is how we got to the United States. And that's the one thing that that helped us. That's how we got out of Germany, because life after Germany, life in Germany after the war was terrible until finally the Marshall Plan came into effect, and the Americans spent billions of dollars to feed people in Germany. And where we lived, we were in Western Germany, of course. And when the Russians came and Germany was divided between the Russians and the Americans and the French and the English troops, most of the people from the Russian troop tried to come to the Western side because they thought that the Americans and the British and the French would take better care of people than the Russians would. So they didn't want to be there. So they all came to the West, So, but I can tell you a funny story. After I came to the United States, and of course I studied very hard, and within 1 year I had learned enough English. I went to a night school at night. I worked during the day my first job, because I didn't speak any English, was in a necktie factory. And I had to work in this necktie factory and be there at 7 o'clock in the morning and sweep out the factory and clean the men's room and the ladies' room and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That was my first job. And I would go to school every night learning English. After exactly 1 year after I was there, I finally got my first job that in the insurance business. And that it was insurance was just a coincidence. I just wanted a business, work in some business, get out of this necktie factory and learn some other businesses and have an opportunity to see what was going on in the world, in America, as far as business is concerned, you know. But you said, you asked me to tell you some other stories. I tell you one story. My brother and I, we would listen to the BBC at night.
Yeah.
To find out what was going on, because the Germans didn't let us know what the truth was. I mean, that was all propaganda all the time. And so we listened to the BBC and we found out about D-Day, that the Allied troops had landed in Normandy and had a beachhead established, and it looked like they were coming toward Germany. So that made us very happy. I was then 12 years old.
Wow.
Now, to tell you a strange story, when I went to the United States back for a moment,
Yeah.
after I was there 3 years and studied and had just started in the insurance business, I was drafted into the United States Army and for 2 years. And this was during the Korean War. And I didn't have to I took basic training with the 101st Airborne at the time. And we were all supposed to go to Korea. This was during the Korean War. They saw my Form 20, which is a personnel form that shows everything that you have ever done and where you were educated and so on. And they saw that I spoke German. So they came to me and they said, "You speak German. We need interpreters in Germany. We're going to transfer you to Germany rather than Korea." Well, I was very happy. I didn't want to go to Korea and get shot at again. You know, so yeah, I went to Germany in the U.S. Army, and I was there a year or two, a couple of years, and one day my company commander called me in and said, "Wurfl, I watched you walking around the parade ground. You have a very good walk. You walk very straight, etc. I would like you to, if you like, to be on the color guard of the 1st Infantry Division." That's the division I was in at that time, 20,000 men, and carry the flag for our division wherever necessary. I said I'd be honored. I'd be glad to do it. Well, 2 or 3 months later, they called me back in and they said, "You're going to Normandy." And I said, "Normandy, why?" I said, "It's the 10-year anniversary of D-Day."
Wow.
So here, as a 12-year-old boy, I heard it on BBC,
Yeah.
and we were happy, my brother and I, that the Allies had finally landed in Europe and were coming toward Germany to give Hitler a hard time. And here, a few years later, 10 years later, at the anniversary of D-Day, I carried the American flag on Omaha Beach and Utah Beach in Normandy. I never forget the one morning, the color guard and the bugler we were taken to a place where a General Roosevelt was buried. He was killed there.
Yeah.
He's one of the sons of Roosevelt.
Wow. Wow.
And we dipped a flag over the channel toward the sun was going up, the bugler was playing. It was just an amazing thing. And I was so proud that I was an American and that I could carry the American flag and honor this general and honor all the many, many Americans who were killed during D-Day.
Yes, sir. Well, if you will only but pardon the personal reference, as the oldest grandson of a World War II veteran who was on the beach that day a long, long time ago on D-Day, I'm just beyond honored that I'm talking to a man who went back on the 20th anniversary and carried the flag. I'm not a movie producer or the son of a movie producer, Jack, but somebody somewhere needs to make a movie about your life, sir.
I mean, it was just such an amazing thing, hearing it on BBC when I was 12 years old, and 10 years later, I'm carrying the flag on D-Day.
Yeah.
I was proud, so very, very proud of where I was in life,
Well, and you have every reason to have been, and I want you to know that we're proud of you, and we're very grateful for your service for our country. We're almost out of time. We have had the time of our life tonight. We have omitted several songs, to just be honest with you, so we would not have to interrupt this discussion. We need to know very quickly, though, how and where our viewing audience can pick up a copy of My Two Lives. I'm assuming that you can go to Amazon.
Yes.
Correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Well, I figured that you could because my wife gets everything else in the world from Amazon, okay? I see Amazon more than I see anything else. Just kind of kidding, but not really.
Yeah.
But it's been a great honor to have you on the program this evening, sir. We've got just a few minutes left. I want to ask you one final question. At 91 years old, you've had this remarkable life experiencing a lot of highs and also some lows. What is your secret to living a long life, and what would you like to be on your epitaph?
Well, right now, having written this book just for my family, but now that it became public and it's being sold in several places, I would very much like for my book to help educate people and let them know what this is all about, what anti-Semitism is all about.
Sure.
And I think my book, if people were to read it, would hopefully learn a lot about it. I've recently heard that young people in America today, between the ages 18 and 28, 30% of them have never heard of what happened during the Hitler days, and that 6 to 7 million Jews were killed. They don't know this.
No, sir.
It's history. Why haven't our schools taught that? Why aren't they teaching that?
Agree.
This is history.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, it did happen. But fortunately, Jack Wurfl, you lived through it, sir.
Very lucky.
And we're so blessed that you not only lived through it, but you took some time this evening here at Nite Line to discuss it with us. I believe that a round of applause and a great big God bless you and a hand would be very, very, very much in order.
I like you to know that I consider this a real honor and a real privilege for me to be on your show and talk a little bit about it. And hopefully some people will look at the book and learn a little bit
Yes, sir.
what happened, what history was all about when it comes to anti-Semitism.
Well, I pray so. Well, as we're going off the air, sir, I want to say thanks again, and I want to say this to you, if I may, with all due respect, as well as our entire viewing audience. Until we meet again, it is our heart's prayer, most sincerely, that the Lord might bless you and keep you, that He might make His face to shine upon you, and that He might be gracious unto you, that the Lord would smile upon your life and give you peace. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit of God, we pray. Amen. God bless
Amen.
you, and good night.
Amen.